be loud with that because there's so many people in here today. We call the meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. on Monday, March the 9th. Let the record reflect that Mike Varnell and Mary Ann Nasland are absent due to illness and injury. Everyone else is here. Pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, any changes to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
All right, we'll jump right in. Budgeting enrollment discussion for 26-27. Hi, Mitch.
You don't make me cry already.
You might want to take the whole box up there with you.
No, I'm just gonna sneeze it like 1,000 times. Unfortunately, that once I start, I'll go like 10 times, so, and I got 2 in. So, this is gonna be short. Just wanted to take a second to show you, do I have control? I do have control, look at that. To show you basically how we came up with the enrollment projections. These numbers are out, OSPI's website. We went into the Education Data System, EDS, pulled prior enrollments so that we could get numbers all the way back to 2016, 2017, 2018, 2016, 17. I think 15, 16 we duplicated, 16, 17 backwards just so we got the 10 years in there. And what we do is we do a cohort survival. So kindergarten to first, first to second, second to third. We do that for 10 years, take the average survival rate, and then multiply it out, multiply that percentage. Too many screens. I was trying to get over to that screen, not realizing I was over here. So that gives us a total number. So the top section's gold bar, 47 kiddos for kindergarten current year. Our 47 is gonna be the projected here. And then you can kind of see the formulas. So the cohort survival is, 1.006, so basically 100% survival.
Where's the, what we currently have? Is that one?
So currently is back just a little bit on this spreadsheet. So these are 25, 26 right here. So AQ and AR. So, and I'm one of those retentive people that I just like to keep the spreadsheet going. I'll hide earlier years, but we didn't have this coming in. So this was something that Chris worked on over Christmas break, and then over Christmas break, right. See, you did get a break.
I did.
And then I double checked the numbers, the formulas and stuff to make sure that we both agreed. And so, when you get over to the right-hand side over here, with the cohort survival, it takes us to here. But we budget to 98%. The reason we budget to 98% is it's easier to add than to subtract. Okay, it's not much of a difference, but when you get to the overall, you can see there's a little bit of a difference.
Is that 1966?
1966. Yep, it's a little older than I am.
And then what are we currently at?
We are currently at,
Go to that, or you can go to the tab.
but that chases me further away.
It does.
So right here, we're at 1944. Is that the right column? Yep. So 2030 for head count, yep, average head count. And
So it'll be
then
an increase then?
244. So it is a little bit of an increase based on these numbers. Now, understanding that this 1966 for FTE is a combination. This is your overall FTE. It's I wanna use the term duplicated. So CTE, FTE would be included within this number. So, you know, when we look at budgeting for CTE, we need to make sure we back them out of the regular so that we don't double budget. I ran into that at Moses Lake. Consistently, they were off by like 200 FTE, and it was because they had ALE, and then they kept those ALE kids in the main number. And so they were always budgeting for more than came in. And theirs was a back and forth. One year they would way over budget those 200 kids, and then the next year they'd flip it and it'd be short 200 kids. And so theirs was never a consistent methodology. So this is the methodology that I'm used to using. Thankfully, Dr. Granger is used to using it as well. So just wanted to show you this, share this with you, so you know that we're not just pulling numbers out of the air.
I appreciate that, I think.
Now, I'm gonna have Kayla show you a little bit of my methodology for budgeting.
You want athletics first?
Yeah, let's take the athletics first. So what I'm used to doing is taking the 5-year history of what we've spent in a specific category and looking year over year at where we are at, where we've been, and then use that to project the next year forward. So we've mentioned before that there was a big difference in what was budgeted for athletics. And I've got this sorted by location, and all of these codes mean something to me and don't mean anything to anybody else. But what I'm used to doing is I'm used to actually sitting with the person or persons who are responsible for those categories. So like in this case, I would sit with Chris Hill and I would say, okay, Chris, so this is what we spent historically. I know it took me a long time to get down there and, you know, the crowd was clapping for me in the background. But as you can see, this column E is what we actually spent last year. So we spent $894,000. Now we had $734,000 budgeted in athletics. This is athletics and activities. Come to current year to date, we have spent $432,000, okay? But for some glorious reason, we budgeted $626,000. We budgeted less than we budgeted the year before, but $270,000 less than we actually spent. So these are things that it's different. I do things differently. I meet with the department heads. We go over the numbers. We talk about what makes sense, okay? Kayla, do you want to pull up utilities? I should have said that different. Can you pull up utilities? I don't care if you want to. It's a joke class. So for utilities, so like here's 0210, that's the high school location, okay? So I can look at an account number, and this is the garbage cost at the high school. Actual cost for this particular line item for garbage was $24,000. We had budgeted 19. Current year to date, we're at 13,000, and we budgeted 18. So we reduced from one year to the next in that category. Why? There's no rhyme or reason. I cannot come with a why we did what we did.
Would it be to make the numbers look right?
That's
all I can think of.
That could be, yeah, it could have been, we have this much money and we gotta make it fit, so let's pull it from here. I don't know. I wasn't here for that part.
So just to clarify, so everyone understands, we spent X and then we budgeted less than what we spent before for no reason whatsoever, basically.
No known reason.
Don't know the reason.
Yeah.
Don't know the reason.
Is there anywhere where last year's budget had a higher,
So, if you go to the total, and I, to be fully honest with you, I've had to create, so there's a digit there's a 4-digit code within this. It's the National Center for Education Statistics code, NCES codes. We were supposed to convert to those in 2018. And I'm working on converting us right now. So I'm trying to make sense of codes that we had, convert them to the new codes, and make sense of what we've got out there. So if you see a 1 on the far right-hand side, that's local dollars. That's something that I purposely will put as spent out of levy, or like if we get to food service and the kids are paying for lunches, that's local dollars. Whereas if we get the money from the state, that's a 0, or from the feds, it's a 0 on the end. So it's a way for us to track certain things I know, like all of Activity 28, all of the athletics and activities should be a 1 on the end, because the state doesn't fund any of that. So they even took away their little grant that they were giving districts for 1660, House Bill 1660. So with that caveat, the budget did increase in utilities. I have to dig out where. So I just wanted to pull this to you so you could kind of get an idea of, I do things based on history. And if it comes to a point where we have to make cuts, like we're looking at for this next year, we have to take all of this into consideration, because we added 4 portables at SES. That doesn't mean I'm gonna spend less in electricity, it means I'm gonna spend more. And so I need to budget accordingly. So, it's those little pieces of working together. Is there gonna be a rate increase this next year? Did startup water districts say they're going to, they're gonna increase their rates? Knowing these pieces, and this is why I work with the department heads, especially my first year coming in, because I'm not familiar with the area. I don't know what things we've got moving forward. Another thing that I started, you could see this last section here, I just started this month because it's important for me to understand how much money we're spending for the Startup Event Center. Because according to our agreement, we get $1 a month, but we pay all utilities. So I want to track how much we're paying to have this building, and then kind of compare it to how much do we actually use it, and because when we use it, we're not to be charged for it. So that's part of the agreement. It's our, makes sense. So is that realistically weighing out evenly? Questions?
You answered mine. I guess.
Questions? Ladies, questions?
No.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right, next, bond planning, financing overview.
So we've asked Trevor Carlson from Piper Sandler to join us tonight. His organization assists school districts with bond financing and planning. And he's going to do an overview of the current situation, and after that, I have a few slides on what the CFAC has on the list for the bond that we're getting priced out by architecture. Once we have those final numbers and we bring you a resolution, Trevor will be able to come back and give some real definitive exact projections based on the cost of the bond. But it started with some just general learning. So Trevor, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Trevor Carlson. I work for Piper Sandler. We serve as bond underwriter for the district and many school districts across the state. I've been doing this for 2 decades. I've financed a lot of projects in a lot of different locations across the state of Washington. So happy to answer questions. And as Dr. Granger mentioned, really just an overview, just do some learning. I'm a teacher tonight. I've got my teacher hat on. So please ask questions. That's why I'm here, from anyone in the audience or in the cabinet or on the board, obviously. And I have a financing example towards the end of the presentation. I want to highlight the term example. There have been no decisions made. You have not made any decisions, but I want to look at concepts and just make sure we're thinking about what a bond is, what it could look like, and some of the levers we can push and pull to really make this your financing, right? Every school district is different, so we want to tailor this to your specific needs. So that's the takeaway for tonight. Again, please interrupt me as we move along. I don't want you to lose your train of thought. I can keep going, I've done this a zillion times. Does that make sense? Is that good? Okay. So you have hard copies of the presentations, and ladies, do you know what? We can get you a few copies too, if you like.
We have them on our computer.
Oh, they're young and smart and they've got it on their computer. I love the piece of paper. Thanks for displaying my age in front of the public. And also on the 11x17 piece of paper is that copy of that model so you can actually read it. But it's also in your PDF so you can zoom in and out if you so desire. Election dates. Again, you have 4 opportunities throughout the calendar year to ask the electorate for funding, whether it's a transportation levy, capital levy, EP&O levy, or a bond. 4 different opportunities, February, April, August, and November. These are really important for milestone planning, right? We pick a target and we have to start working backwards, making sure we're hitting all of our goals to make things happen. So for example, if you were thinking February 9th of 2027, a resolution would need to be approved by the governing body and delivered to the county auditor on or before December 11th. If you turn it on the 12th, you will not be on the ballot. And then approximate mailing dates, for in that line item example, that would be January 22nd when those ballots would be dropped in the mailbox. And then certify a couple weeks later, February 19th. So just as an example, again, lots of dates out there, but just to make sure we're thinking appropriately and planning backwards appropriately. Slide 2 is some empirical data on bond passage rates across the state. So I've got 2 different graphs here, top and bottom. The top graph looks at bond passage rate by those specific 4 opportunities that you have throughout the calendar year. So round numbers, any bond that's been on the ballot back to 1992 has passed at 50%, about a third in April, about a third in November. 1 out of 8 have passed in August. It's just a little bit more of a trickier time, in my personal opinion, to get messaging out about school topics because it's the middle of the summer. So there's no right or wrong answer. That's very freeing. I figured this out not too long ago. I'm kind of like the weather person. I'm never correct. I will always be wrong. But again, what we're trying to describe to you is just different spectrum of possibilities and finding the pros and cons that work for you all. And so there are many school districts that have passed in November and April and February. Again, it just kind of depends on the timing and when you feel it's right to ask the electorate. The bottom graphic shows by calendar year the average passage rates for all of the bonds that are on the ballot in that calendar year. So for example, in 2026, 38% of the bonds that were on the ballot last month passed out of the 13 attempts. There were 13 tries, 38% passed. Long-term historical average, if I take an average from 92 until today, it's about 39-40%. Let's just use 40%, it's easier to remember. So on average, 40% of any bond on the ballot passes. What's the inverse of that? 60% are not successful. So it is not an easy game. It's not a game, but it's not an easy attempt. It sometimes takes multiple tries. Okay? And I'll go through passage rate in a couple slides, right? I've got so many things to talk about, it's kind of tough to hit them all at once, but I will kind of talk about the pros and cons and of the passage rate thresholds for those opportunities. These are your specific election results. Again, not a lot of information here for decision making, but from just so you have in your back pocket, so you know as you get closer to a possible election date, Knowing your history is important. So your bond elections, your capital project levy elections on the bottom of slide 3. And the next slide are operating levy elections. Again, congratulations on successful passage. It is nice to know that for a 4-year period, those numbers are locked in and approved by the voters. Next slide is page 5. This is a history of the district's levy rates or tax rate or millage rate. These are the dollars per thousand assessed to individual properties. It's not a perfect way to describe the cost of a specific measure, but it's kind of our only way because every single individual has a different home value. And so it's tough for me on a global scale to say it's gonna cost this much for a person because I can't. Everyone's tax bill is different. If I can project a tax rate, you can take your home value, lop off 3 zeros, multiply it by this tax rate to give you your assessment, your annual assessment. So right now, in 2026, there's a capital projects levy of 99 cents per thousand, an EP&O operating levy at $1.55 to add up to $2.54. If you do all of this math, there is some rounding. These tax rates go out to many decimal places. Questions thus far? Not seeing any. Okay, keep moving. Page 6 looks at comparable tax rates, and I can, the next time we chat, I will make sure that this is updated. I'm literally getting all of the tax booklets for all the counties and trying to compile them into a database. So this is 2025 data, but it gives you a relative ranking. It might not be fair or not, and I'll describe why. From total highest tax rate to lowest, just to give you a sense of kind of what your neighbors. I threw in Chelan County just to give you a little bit of a bigger data set, but I can slice and dice this any way you like. Sometimes we take enrollment, and that can be a way for us to differentiate or kind of compile a different list. So you're kind of in the middle of the pack there. And again, I mentioned maybe not the most fair assessment. Look at one line item above yours, Edmonds, right? Massively different assessed value, 51 billion versus 3.2. So apples and oranges on that front. So what I've done on the next slide is I've taken school districts that have a similar assessed value all across the state, lumped them into probably a 20 line item list here, and rank those from highest to lowest. And it gives you a sense of the composition also of who has a bond on their books and who doesn't, and that's usually a pretty big determinant in that relative ranking. Okay. Next slide, page 8. I mentioned earlier we'll chat a little bit about passage rates and the differences between certain levies, but you could be asking me why bonds. In bonds, think of bonds as it's a big loan, it's a mortgage, if you will, that the district takes out on large capital facilities. It's a way for you to drive large dollars into your capital projects fund and spread the opportunity for repayment over a long period of time to keep relatively low tax rates, right? You could, and let's just do a kind of a theoretical pros and cons of the capital levy versus a bond. So a capital levy's great, 50 plus 1% passage, approval needed. A bond is 60% plus validation. So much higher threshold for a bond. The benefit of the bond is if you have a $100 million bond, I can sell it all at once and you can put $100 million in the bank and go forth and tackle projects. With the capital project levy, let's say it's 100 million, keep it apples to apples, you would collect that over a 6-year time period, much higher collection rates, right? Your bond payments are gonna be low and spread out. A spike in tax rate if you did 100 million over 6 years, and you would have a pay-as-you-go, right? You would have a project that would be most likely elongated, a longer scope of work or to tackle that same scope of work than a bond. So again, no right or wrong answer. The tax burden would be very, very significant in this example because the dollar amounts are so significant. But that's really the differential, right? Kind of pay as you go, lower passage rate, which is great. A bond, secure that bond, you get that revenue, you sell that bond, pay off the payments with interest over a long period of time to keep that tax burden as low as possible. And I'll show you on that big piece of paper in a couple slides what an example of that big mortgage or loan or bond looks like, okay? One thing I touched on there, I didn't go into detail, is validation. So bonds are the only levy that requires validation. And what that means is 40% of the people that voted in the last general election need to vote for your bond. So it's kind of economies are a critical mass, if you will. You can't have 3 people come out and vote yes and the bond passes. You need hundreds of people to come out and vote to make sure the bond passes, okay? Questions on kind of that differential between capital project levy, which you have on the books, you're familiar with, but just kind of wanted to do that kind of give and take between that and a bond financing.
I think we're good.
Okay. Debt capacity, we always start at this place when I start to build my model to determine if the financing that you are considering is in the realm of legality. So the Constitution says that school districts can borrow up to 5% of their assessed value. That's the maximum amount of debt that you can have outstanding. So $3.4 billion tax base in 2026 multiplied by 5% gives you $170 million and change. Take away the non-voted debt that's outstanding. Your capacity right now is $167 million. That changes every year when the assessed value changes. And then as the principal is retired on any borrowings, that debt capacity would then increase. You can borrow without the vote of the people. As you have on the books today, that's a much lower threshold at 0.3%. And with a voted bond, you will receive the unlimited taxing power to collect taxes to repay principal and interest on that bond. With a non-voted bond, you do not have that taxing capacity, so it basically turns into a general fund obligation unless you use capital levy dollars to maybe pay down principal. But again, not creating a new revenue stream if you borrow on that non-voted debt side. This is just what's outstanding on the books today. The 3 limited general obligation bonds are non-voted debt obligations. Again, no decisions to be made here, just information for you, which is baked also into your financials and your notes to your financials that Mitch puts together on an annual basis. So this is, page 11 is really the realm of where I live. I'm thinking with school districts on a daily basis, what's your project budget? How much do you need? What types of revenue can you receive to take care of those project costs? And bonds is the primary method, right? You can receive some state match depending on how the calculation works. And really in general, it's based on the age and condition of your facilities, and then if you have any unhoused students in general. But I don't pretend to understand that calculation. That's why you go through a process and the state helps you. Investment earnings, impact fees can be some marginal beneficiary revenue generators, but primarily it's going to be bonds. Timing in life is super important. So I want to look at your construction cash flow. How does it flow? How much, maybe minimal costs are for the first year, and then you start digging dirt, buying concrete, pounding nails, the costs go up. So we kind of want to match your financing to what your anticipated construction expenditure looks like. So that's super, super important, that construction draw schedule. Again, that's how we tailor this financing to you. And then what's the taxpayer impact? Ultimately, what does this mean we have to make a lot of assumptions, which are bullet pointed out there as far as interest rates, bond rating, assessed value, and ultimately the structure of the debt to determine what the estimated taxpayer cost will be. And we'll go through those assumptions next. Assessed value, this pattern is very familiar for many school districts across the region. Going into, with the housing, bubble in the early 2000s, the popping of that bubble in the Great Recession, assessed values going down, and then the significant ramp up as fiscal and monetary policy was very, very accommodating. We saw massive increases going into 22 and 23 in assessed value. And a little bit of a flattening out, if you will, kind of a normalization time period the last couple of years. One thing I like to look at to help me think about what should we put into the plan for a long-term assessed value growth rate are those numbers on the middle of the right-hand side, the compound annual growth rate. So over a 20-year period, your school district's assessed value, right, all of the real and personal property within the school district boundaries added up has grown on average at 6.3% per year. So maybe let's take half of that, something like that, because we see these ups and downs. We're projecting bond payments out for 20 plus years. There will be ups and downs, well, maybe not downs, you never know. We didn't think there would ever be downs in assessed value, but we've experienced them. So how do we mitigate that over a long period of time? And it's kind of the conservatism in the long-term plan, right? Your construction folks are gonna do this. They're gonna put in, what's it called? Contingency. So we're doing some of that work here too. And then I think on the next page, I've just broken out the assessed value in totality. I like to see those percentage changes every year. In 2023, 35, almost 36% increase in tax value is significant. And then a pretty good clip of new construction. And new construction broadens that tax base, right? Brings in the new ability to kind of peanut butter that burden over a bigger area. So remember, school districts collect dollar amounts. I guarantee you, if you go to Snohomish County website, look up your tax bill, it did not go up 35.8% that year. Because school districts collect a tax amount, a dollar amount. All the tax rate is division, it's math, right? It's the amount you collect divided by this changing assessed value denominator creates a tax rate. So that tax rate's gonna go up and down to moderate and kind of back into the total dollar amount of collections for your EP&O and bond and capital levy. Okay, so I wanna be crystal clear there, because when folks see their home values go up a massive amount, there's a knee-jerk reaction, there goes my tax bill. It's not true. Look it up. And if it is true, call me and I'll buy pizza next time. Look it up. Page 14, interest rates. I've used terms like debt, mortgage, bond, big loan. Interest rates are important when you take out a big loan. And a bond is a very, very large financial obligation. Interest rates have been relatively stable, let's say the last quarter of last year through a week ago. Interest rates with headline risk of what's been going on the world stage has kind of yin-yanged interest rates around a little bit, but we're still in a pretty tight range. That being said, it's still a pretty good time to borrow long-term on behalf of the district's taxpayers. Today, I was on a preliminary pricing call with Ording School District. They passed in November. We're gonna sell about $60 million worth of bonds tomorrow morning. Their total borrowing cost, kind of like an APR, called the true interest cost, it'll be sub 4%. It'll be, I don't know, maybe round number 3.75%. That's still very, very attractive. And again, think about this. You're borrowing on behalf of the district's taxpayers at levels that the largest corporations in the world cannot touch. Boeing, Microsoft, others cannot borrow at these levels. You receive a special federal subsidy, if you will, called tax exempt status, and that drives down your borrowing costs significantly. So, bottom line, interest rates are in a pretty good place right now. And this is where the rubber meets the road on the big piece of paper, or zoom in on your iPad. Let me work you through the output of our bond sizing model that creates, and really the pattern I'm trying to create is some semblance of tax stability. And what does that mean? In my mind, it means we're gonna try and maintain tax rates to be level, not have them jump around, okay? So let's start on the upper left-hand side where I have assumptions. I've assumed a AAA rating, so this is like your FICO score. You will receive a bond rating when you go out to the marketplace. They'll go through a process of a presentation, and they give their good housekeeping seal of approval, their independent due diligence. So think of that as your credit score. The state allows you to borrow their credit rating. With Moody's, they are AAA, the best rating. It's called the School Bond Guarantee Program. So think of that as belt and suspenders. For any reason a school district does not make their payments on the bonds, investors know, based on this program, the state will step in and make them whole. That's very, very safe. Safety creates lower borrowing costs. And number two, your credit rating, I'm guessing, will be in the mid-single A level, which is an investment grade credit rating, strong credit rating. So that's my assumption there. As far as interest rates, let's just say they're 4%. I've put 5% into the model because you do not lock in borrowing costs until you actually get the voters to approve the measure, and then there's a couple months later before you can access the market, so there's some delay there. It's kind of like your mortgage, right? Mortgage rates go up and down. You don't lock it in until you lock it in. We don't sell bonds till we sell bonds to lock it in, and then you close a couple weeks later. Very similar kind of process from a paperwork perspective. So I've used some contingency there, if you will, right? Some conservatism. Assessed value, your growth is highlighted in the yellow box in 2026. What was our 20-year compound annual growth rate for assessed value? 3, 2, something like that. I know it was a 6, because I took half of that. I put 3% growth in the model going forward. If that's what we agree on, will we be right? No, we'll probably be wrong in the first year. But it's pretty conservative. And then below that, under issue 1, 2, I've taken, again, for discussion purposes only, $100 million, and I broke it into 2 bond sales. Put $50 million into the capital projects fund on March 1st of 27, and then $50 million on September 1st in calendar 28. Again, your construction cash flow and your plan will drive your model. And then below that, it has an estimate of what the principal and interest payments would look like for those 2 specific bond issuance. Moving over, kind of in the middle of the sheet, that blue box is your capital project levy and the annual collections there. And then your EP&O levy. And then out in the future, starting in 2031 and on for your EP&O levy, I just grew it at 3% every year just to match the the assessed value growth rate. And then what I'm trying to accomplish, again on the far right-hand side, is let's move the principal and interest payments around where we can on those 2 bond issuance, issue 1 and 2. Wrap those around your existing obligations of your capital levy and EP&O to create a pattern that's stable. I've got $4.22, and this model would be your new combined total tax rate. You're at $254 now. And then it would fall to $356, assuming, and again, I've made an assumption, and we can plug in numbers and do all sorts of sensitivity, assuming the capital levy goes to 0, right? There's a big cliff there, if you will, of funding that drops, hence why the total tax rate decreases. One way to look at the kind of the cost of this is right in the middle of the projected tax rates is a column called total bonds. It bounces around a little bit in the beginning because I'm wrapping around your existing obligations. But, after that, it's $1.64. So you can kind of use that too. It's like, okay, the cost of the bond would be $1.64. Another way to think about it. I've hit you with probably some new concepts, some new terms, questions. There are no silly questions, trust me.
Michael, questions?
No,
And we can go back to, seriously.
I was just looking at the first few years compared to, the charts that you provided before comparing other districts.
Yeah, yes, and that's why I bring them. So, right, because that natural comparison process starts to happen.
Yeah.
Isaac, questions?
No.
Ladies?
Not right now, nope.
And then, oops, I bounced too far forward. So this is one way for me to help describe to the community in this generic example that I made up of 100 million, what it would cost an average homeowner. And so I went to the interwebs, I found 550 as an average home price. I can do a zillion different, or I can plug in the number and it changes, right? So whether or not that's the right number is not relevant. So I plugged in 550 and that's right in the middle of that sheet, okay? And I've taken that number and escalated it, grew it, if the assessed value actually grew at that 3% every year. So you take 550 plus 3% over and over and over, gets down to 856 and change at the bottom. And then I did the same thing going backwards, right? I took that home value and then decreased it, if you will, by the assessed value growth rates, right? Backed into what that house would have been in 2016 if it grew or decreased exactly at the average assessed value rate, right? By and large, your homes are gonna follow that pattern. They could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but they're gonna follow that pattern. They have to, right? The entire district is going that way. So what this shows is the annual tax bill change. The second column in from the right is annual property taxes. Again, what is that? It's the tax rate times that house value, right? So in this year, it's 254 times 550, lop off the 3 zeros, remember, is $1,396. And then I did a subtraction from year to year to show you what, when the new bonds would hit in this example, what that tax burden would be. So we would elevate up, we saw that tax rate go up, and then it would drop then in 2031 based upon that step down in my model where the capital levy goes to zero, the collections go to zero. And then pretty moderate growth after that. So one way to describe it. And another would be to look at a graphical representation. Looking back to 2006, how the tax rate has changed. Your existing, your old mortgage was paid off in 2017. Those dark bars in the past, and then your EP&O levy and how that's changed over time. Again, just trying to be systematic and stack the debt to create a pattern of some tax stability. But you can see the big driver there is the kind of gold bars in the middle, the capital levy. It's a significant collection amount. I think is that my last slide?
It is.
Yeah. As Dr. Granger mentioned, as you're working through, I like to think of it as an upside down triangle, right? You can have scope A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, 100 different scopes of work. Cost each of those out, right? Those are pros and cons of what you think the community would be interested in. Is it, I'm not even gonna speculate, right, ABC? Financing plan ABC next to them to help you have a better understanding of, right, the total cost right? It's, when you see these big numbers in isolation, it can be daunting. Let's throw in this type of an example to each of those, so you can see what does this really mean for folks' pocketbook if we decide to go high, medium, low.
Anybody have questions? No?
Very well done, makes it very clear, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Trevor.
Yes, you're welcome. As always, if you have questions, your CEO knows my number. He's got my cell phone. If you need anything, even the CFO has my cell phone. If you need anything, let me know. I will be back. I will provide you, a zillion different options, right? The marginal cost to me to run the next scenario is minimal. I wanna make sure you have what you need to be comfortable if you decide to go down this path.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay,
Very well
thank
done.
you.
So from there, I was gonna just hit real briefly what the CFAC has been working on that would come to a resolution in the board at some point. So we've got Trevor on board for helping us determine the finance. At the last board meeting, in the contracts, we agreed to use Zervis Architects to help us plan, conceptually draw up and do bond projects. They're in the process of pricing those out. We take that pricing back to Trevor. He comes up with the actual dollar amounts and then comes back to you for approval. So just wanted to show you a little bit about what the CFAC has been working on. And one of the, you can advance it. One of the reminder, this is a slide I keep in all of them. Levies are for learning. We're very appreciative that the levy passed. We can now move on to bond planning, which are for building, which we are in desperate need of. They do, however, require the supermajority to pass. No traction in this legislative session on movement in that, so. Go ahead. And then one of the things that I was asked to do when we started this process was to have a vision and a plan for more than just one bond, because there wasn't gonna be one bond that was gonna fix all of the things that we need right now. So I know Michael and Mary Ann have both been attending the CFAC meetings on behalf of the board of directors. And so we look at that, we look at when our buildings are eligible to match state funds and tried to come up with a plan. Always subject to change in 10, 20 years, but wanted to show the community a vision and a thought for more than just right now. So if we talk about the 2026 bond, this is what they have asked us to price out. So a new high school on the Sultan Basin Road property. An expansion of Gold Bar, which we anticipate to be about 18 classrooms and a gym. So the gym and cafetorium that's there now would stay as the cafeteria. A gym would go in there, and that would house all of the students in the district's preschool through second grade. There's a couple reasons we talked about that grade level. One is the youngest learners getting out of the floodplain. That was one discussion point. Another discussion point was the need to focus on early learning. So getting those grade levels that don't have state assessments together. Another discussion we had is it's hard sometimes for teachers in the same grade level to meet up on Friday, early release Friday, because of the travel time between Gold Bar and Sultan Elementary. So allowing those grade level teachers to be together. That's also as we see enrollment going down with smaller birth rates. With two buildings, we're in this tricky enrollment thing even starting next year where we may be 5 to 6 kids over a certain grade level in Gold Bar, that if we divide that by 2 teachers puts us over the CBA language. But if we had those teachers plus the Sultan teachers in a grade level and there were 7, each teacher would take 1 more student and we'd be under the number. So kind of economy of scale for staffing. So those are some of the things that we talked about. Also, the last thing we talked about was getting students to be able to connect and make relationships at a younger age, knowing that they eventually right now merge in the 6th grade, and that 5th to 6th grade transition is sometimes challenging for students. Middle school is a really hard time. And when 2/3 of the students come out of one building and a third come out of the other, there's a little bit of a challenge sometimes getting them to go together. So The second one was to move the 3rd through 5th grade students district-wide then to the existing middle school footprint. And then the current high school would house grades 6 through 8. We would go back and do some modification at SES in mainly the 2 front buildings that face Dave, I think is the road there. That could house the parent partnership program that we're putting up, the district office, so we could get rid of the 3 modular buildings there. Technology, which is currently still in the middle school building or the back of the middle school building. A boardroom and professional development space that could house learning for teachers when we have group learning. It would give us that space. The other thing about the community, the aspect we were trying to hit is the growing desire for community spaces. So one of the things we talked to Zervis about was a basic turf in the existing, I guess you wouldn't even say existing, close to the grass area that's out there in the back of the elementary once you pull the portables off, that could be for community use and youth sports. So that would be for a dad or mom that wants to throw the ball with their kid on the weekend, or youth football, youth baseball that we're getting up and going. That's not a space the school district would use for team-based practice, but it would be something that the community could utilize for that. And then we would leave the stadium where it is now for varsity football. We wouldn't go build a new stadium up on the basin at the high school because the stadium's still good. That would be a huge expense to add another 2,000 seat, 1,500 seat stadium when we have one that's generally still usable. The turf was just replaced. The one thing that we would do, you guys know that Dave Moon is gonna start teaching a broadcasting class next year. So we would braid our CTE dollars for broadcasting with some potential bond money to replace the school board and probably put in a video board that the broadcasting class could use cameras on the sideline to project to the board, which would also make us attractive for hosting playoff type events because we would have some facilities that would represent that. So those are currently what's being costed out. And then if you go to the next one, these are much less developed, but in 2036, so you have some more buildings available for state match, you could determine at that time, do you go back to the old elementary site now that you've cleared it, except for the 2 front buildings, and do you build a 3-5 school there? Do you build 2 preschool through 5 buildings? Because now Gold Bar has enough classroom capacity to be bigger. And then modify and demolish the SMS, so move the parent partnership and the things that are going to SES in the first time, move them over, and then that would give you the next site you could use if you wanted to build something that the district already owns without having to go buy property. And we just put in that the turf replacement is on about a 10-year cycle, so showing that we're accounting for some of that anticipated cost.
And just to be clear, this one and the next one would be additional bonds
Yes.
over what, I just wanna make that clear.
Yeah, so this would be a 2036 bond would be the earliest based on the match that we would advise the district considering running again. And then the last one is just because they requested a really long range plan, is that you could then move the middle school to the high school that you build in 27, 28 and go back to the existing high school facility now and build a high school there next to the stadium and go back. And in 35 years, you would have replaced all of the district's core instructional buildings, maximizing state match and minimizing the impact on the taxpayers by maximizing what we're matching with the state, so, go ahead. So, that's just a general kind of overview. The request was for having a long-range plan beyond just one bond, so we tried to put that together. But I've been, every time I travel with Bella and Olivia, we talk about what a new high school would mean for our students and some of the things that it could do. Even now, we talk about not being able to practice on the infield in softball and baseball since softball started. You have not been on the infield of the fields that we have. And by building facilities that are year-round, we're also partnering with our community to have facilities that can be utilized, which we know is a big interest in small towns like Sultan, they want to be able to access the facilities, so. Feel really good about the work the CFAC has done, we'll price those out and bring them back to you in the form of a resolution. We are, hoping to bring that back to you before April, so that we can maximize May and June before people get out of town, and I can rely on Olivia and Bella to do some student perspective on what a new high school would mean with some of the peers that they know. Student voice being important, and then ask the board for the potential blessing on putting that out in November. As Trevor talked about, we have some contemplations on validation versus election. We had about 3,700 voters in the February election, so we know the 40% mark for that. The November election is slated to be high turnout because of some of the initiatives that didn't get through the legislature that will be on the ballot. So there's a possibility that with good education and a good citizens committee, which we've reinforced with the CFAC and with music parents and athletic parents, this is gonna have to be a group of people that really wanna see this happen for our kids and community. And so validation would be less of a concern potentially in November. If you waited till February and you had a much higher November turnout, you could potentially pass at 60% approval and not validate, because the traditional voter turnout is more like the February turnout. So the risk in that is the discouragement of having the percentage to pass and not having the number of voters turn out. So those are just some things that we'll be asking the board to think about as we decide when and how and what. And appreciate both Michael and Marianne being on the CFAC and being able to listen to the people that are there showing up and represent the board there as well. So I'll take any questions if you have any.
Questions, Michael?
One, and it actually ties into his presentation. We had $170,000, or $170 million on the
Capacity.
capacity.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea ballparking even? I mean,
I wouldn't even put a number out because we just saw Zervis on Thursday and told them what we went through is basically how many classrooms would we put in a high school? About 32, including CTE, general ed, special ed, 2 gyms, cafeteria.
cool. Yeah, I just recall
Yeah.
that there, like at one point there was like, oh yeah, high school usually goes for, and it was.
Yeah, whenever you
I
heard
know that
that, it
was-
was
I know
before.
Yeah.
So they're
That's
working
probably
on that right now. They'll be
Okay.
back in the district on Thursday doing some site visits with Charlie and Renee, just really putting eyes on different facilities. We gave them all the aerial images. We talked about the piece of property we own, the things that would have to happen there, and so they're pencil to papering it. And once they have a good solid belief, then we'll get back with the CFAC and then we'll come back to the board.
Well, and we had talked a little bit about the timing of the bond, so that's something that we'll want to discuss more. Any other questions though? Ladies?
No, just let us know when you're ready for the student perspective, and we'll run some surveys and get some videos.
Thank you, Bella and Olivia.
All right, I do have one question. I'm gonna go back. It's gonna be from Mitch. Yes, sorry. You're not though. I can see you. 5th grade camp, did the state took away the grant that paid for that, correct?
Right, so they had an outdoor ed grant that they gave to a separate agency that managed it. And they did grants to districts. We had, I think ours was around 58,000 last year, and that disappeared. So,
And 5th grade camp is usually like 60s, was it 64 last year?
yeah, it's right in the same range. And, I know that my kids, one of them went through 5th grade camp and the other one, it wasn't, this is before that grant came through and, we fundraised, I went as a chaperone, it was a great experience. Unfortunately, just,
Yeah.
money's tight.
I just wanted to make that clear that we were being funded for that and then now we're not being funded for
Was that a state grant?
Yeah, it's from the state, so the state took the money away, so that is why there is currently no 5th grade camp is because the state took the money away.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I would say our principals are coming up with a good plan in partnership with our high school students and administrators from both middle school and high school to have a good 2-day on-site plan for students.
Anything else from anyone? All right, can I get a motion to executive session?
We do have
How long?
executive session, I would say probably 15 minutes, but if we could take a couple minute break before we go to that, that'd be great.
Yes. What time? It's 7:00, so start back at 7:10, does that work, or 7:15?
7:15 and then we'll try to go to 7:30, does that work?
Yes,
Okay.
so can I get a motion to adjourn and go into executive session for 15 minutes, starting at 7:15?
I'll motion to adjourn and go into executive session to return to 7:15.
Do I have a second?